Janice, you're muted.
Good afternoon, everyone. I apologize for being late joining. I had something come up, and I am bringing up my document now for roll call. If you'd bear with me for just a minute, I'll be able to take care of that.
Yep, take your time.
All right, Town of Ashland, Miss Amos,
Here.
Charles City County, Miss Adams, Mr. Mitchell, Chesterfield County, Chair Smith,
Here.
Miss Walker, Hanover County, Mr. Badunez,
Here.
Mr. Hardman, County, Mr. Yor, Miss Smidler.
Here.
Thank you. New Kent County, Miss
Here.
Miss Leduc. Sorry about that. Powhatan County, Mr. Chardine. City of Richmond, Miss Clark. TRTC, Mr. Adarqua. Miss Robinson.
Here.
CVTA, Mr. Parsons.
Here.
Plan RVA, Mr. Bushing.
Here.
DRPT, Ms. Dubinsky. Mr.
She's
Hud.
moving over.
Okay. VDOT, Mr. Totten. Mr. Riblet.
Here.
Miss McAdory. RMTA, Miss Dean.
Here.
Thank you. Virginia Port Authority, Miss Nelson. That concludes the roll call for attendance. I will check the Zoom and add anyone who has come in since we began. Thank you.
And Barb, you're muted.
Sorry. Next on the agenda is consideration of amendments to the agenda. Are there any amendments? Okay. We'll move on then to item 4, approval of the November 4th, 2024 meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? And if there are no changes, I'll take a motion for approval.
So moved, City of Richmond, Dirana.
Thanks, Dirana. Is there a second?
Sharon Smidler, second.
Thanks, Sharon. We'll handle this with a voice vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Moving on to item 5, public comment period. Is there anyone joining us that would like to comment, or have we gotten any comments through other sources?
No other comments.
Okay. CVTA TAC Chairs report. I don't have anything to report. Item 7. Okay, yeah, here we go. Now we're to the meat of the matter. CVTA Regional Project Selection and Allocation Framework. So last time we met, we talked about changes, the updates that we're making to the framework document. And the one unresolved issue is transit safety. There was concern with that measure. We formed a subcommittee, and that subcommittee has met once to go through some of the suggestions that were brought up by the TAC as possible sources to evaluate safety, transit projects for safety. So I'm going to attempt to get everyone caught up on that by sharing. Share this presentation. Let me get to the top. Okay. I think you all can see that. So the first thing I want to do really quick is just remind folks about how it's scored currently. The scoring is modeled after Smart Scale, and we're evaluating crash frequency and crash rate. And the logic is transit projects on higher volume roads with more crashes will score better than those on lower volume roads with fewer crashes. Some of the results from our last round had people concerned, and something we might be able to do, we might want to consider to help with that is we can normalize to the lowest score rather than to 0. Am I saying that right, Miles? I think I am. And other concerns with using crash data is that it implies a mode shift that might not be realistic. And then another issue, as far as a data source goes, is that some of the projects don't have projected ridership data. So there's a lot of, I guess, it makes it hard to come up with safety evaluation. So these are the sources that were brought up as possible alternatives for safety evaluation of transit projects or options. So the first one is we could just eliminate the safety category completely. Another is to refine the Smart Scale measure. Smart Scale actually doesn't use crash rate. They just use crash frequency. So we could get rid of the crash rate part. And we could normalize differently. So that would make scores look better as well. And we could change the percentage weighting. Let me go back a slide so you know what I'm talking about. So we've got percentage weightings in our different categories: safety, congestion, accessibility, and we've agreed to add activity centers as another measure. So these percentage weights for those different categories, we can change those. So we could change the safety percentage weight. Going down this list, another option that was brought up was using GRTC performance measures, but those are really for to evaluate existing transit routes. So that didn't seem applicable. We talked a lot about DRPT merit safety criteria. And I'll show you a slide about that. There's an advantage to using that because it's a defined process already. I'll show you slides on that in a minute. And then another one that the subcommittee liked was pedestrian safety mapping tool. So VDOT has the PSAP for pedestrian safety. I don't know what the app stands for, but anyway, they've identified the top 1%, top 5% of corridors with pedestrian crash issues. And I'll go through that with a slide. Another one was the FDA transit system user benefit. And we all agreed that was too data intensive and just might be too cumbersome. So the merit, like I was talking about, this is what DRPT uses to score capital projects going after their grants. And they give points for projects that include improvements to assets. So, that could reduce crashes. If the project includes technology-related items, if it's making improvements to customer facility areas, such as waiting areas and bus stops, pedestrian access. They also give points for projects that are directly related to safety and emergency response. So they have a evaluation method that's well defined, and the subcommittee thought this would be worth looking into more. And this is the VDOT Bike Ped Safety Action Plan. I should have known it was action plan, right? This is a little screenshot that shows the 1% and 5% roadways. We could consider, similar to Merit, that transit stop access improvements are improve safety for transit riders. And we might be able to assign benefit points to transit projects that are located within these pedestrian corridors where we've got pedestrian concerns and issues. And then we could also add points for projects that are including improvements to reduce pedestrian crashes. Again, kind of thinking about if you're in in the top 1%, a transit project on a corridor that's in the top 1%, you might get more points. If you're doing more access improvements, you would get more points. And the access improvements are things that we've talked about, like bus stop improvements, bus bulb outs, better sidewalk, pedestrian refuge areas, and crosswalk improvements. So this is where we landed. The stuff in yellow made the cut with the subcommittee, but we hadn't really refined those too much. We had some questions that we asked Chet to help us with for the purpose of this meeting today. I'm trying to get my head together. We want to be sure that we don't make the measure so cumbersome as far as the required data that it needs or the evaluation of that data, that it's hard for the applicants or hard for staff to implement with projects. So that's something to keep in mind. I think I'm handing it over now to Chet.
Yeah, thanks. Miles, do you want me to share the screen or do you want to?
I can share.
And I
Okay.
guess before I go, does anyone have questions? I went through that kind of fast. Okay, I think we're good.
Great. So the couple questions that we wanted to look at from the discussion last time was really one, looking at the smart scale measure, sort of how is that calculated? Because that all comes through our travel demand model. So just so everyone's kind of on the same page of what we're calculating and how that works. And then the second part was looking at those other measures and what data sources we would need or data sets we would need from you all as the applicants to be able to calculate those. So this is very much the distilled, simplified version of the travel demand model and what it does. I'm not the expert, obviously, but I did have a chance to sit down and talk with Sulab a lot more about how our model works to calculate it. And it does calculate everything on the transit side that we're scoring, all goes through the travel demand model. So that's important to sort of understand that. Basically, with the four-step model, the trip generation and distribution are based primarily on the socioeconomic data. So we know where jobs are, we know where people are, that's where people want to go. So we can calculate a sort of level of latent demand between two places. The mode split is where we get to transit. And the question was really, well, how do you determine the modal trade-offs when there's transit in a new area that wasn't there before? Essentially, it's a series of logistic regressions that are validated against the real world data. But it's looking at the travel and wait times on transit compared to driving, and then the user costs. And so things like the location, your dedicated lanes, your frequency, fares, those all have impacts on the choice to use transit rather than to drive in the model. And then the final step is a trip assignment where it's then basically the most efficient routing on transit is selected for the individual trip. So if you're going from A to B, what's the easiest way to get there that would be fastest and least expensive for the user? And then the way that we're calculating that into the safety side of things is basically at the end of running everything, we have outputs of how many people were driving across the region, how many people were using transit, so we can calculate the shift in vehicle miles traveled. And that change in VMT is what we're using as the stand-in for the crash modification factor. So that's the nutshell version of how the travel demand model. The question that we had in the subcommittee when we met was basically, is there a set number? Is it 10%? Is it 12%? Is it? And the answer is no. It's basically, it looks at a lot of factors and then calculates how those choices are being made, and it's validated against the real world data from when the model was built. So
Can I ask a quick question, Miles? So in the trip assignment, can you massage that? So like in Nova, let's say, well, I guess that would take in, that's all the travel time. Like in Nova, there's so much congestion, right? It's going to push a lot more people to transit.
So there's a feedback loop built in between trip assignment and trip distribution that looks at sort of the actual travel times. So that is factored in, is I guess part of it. The difference for transit is we're not specifically looking at congestion on the transit route in terms of how many people are on that bus. We're just assigning people to the most efficient bus route.
Mhm. Amy?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. So first, great job summarizing that the meeting that we had. So I guess, Miles, is this going to be updated in the new travel demand model, the transit element?
Yes, so every time we update the model, we have to update this. So part of the LRTP, what's going on right now, and will be part of this next year of our work, is updating it for the latest transit data.
Okay, so I guess I'm wondering, is this something we could do a little more research on? I'm assuming that there will be more research as part of the update as it relates to transit and how best we can model that. To make, because I'm not sure, I mean, this all seems fine, but this is probably a standard approach, right? As the four-step model looks at transit, this is probably the standard approach, which historically has been a question, right? Not Richmond, but just in general with four-step models, not really being able to, forecast transit ridership. So I guess that's my question is there something we can do in terms of the update to have better transit forecasting? And then, we'll kind of punt, I guess, maybe until that work is done. And in the meantime, we could stick with what you have potentially.
So I mean, I guess, yes, we can work and see if there's any improvements. Part of, as I mentioned, we have to update the model for the LRTP. Every 10 years, we have to update the model kind of wholesale. So, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities for us to look at the actual modeling, but as of now, it is following sort of standard practice. And I think that your point's well taken on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to look at FTA and how they're now capturing ridership in corridor modeling. And again, I mentioned the stops model. I'm sure they've made improvements on that over the last few years. But when we get to that point, maybe as part of the transit update, I could certainly ask for a meeting with the FTA, Jeff Rue, who oversees the modeling, and we could maybe have a conversation with him about that.
So maybe that's part of our long range plan update.
Yeah,
is
that's what I'm wondering, if maybe potentially that might be the long-term approach to this because I think the travel demand model is going to be looked to, right? People are going to rely on the travel demand model to give us that information. That's just an inherent assumption. But if it historically has not really captured transit ridership very well, and I guess I would want to see an example of what this would produce to say that, yes, this is reasonable in terms of ridership expectation on a new alignment, or new bus, an extension, to see how it really behaves.
Okay. Chet?
Yeah, thanks. Just quickly, I think Miles told me that 2027 is the next deadline for a model update.
Yeah, right.
So that's kind of the horizon year for our current four-step model. I think it's going to stay four-step at least until then, when the TPO considers options. But there's going to be refinements taking place, and there's actually a lot of great energy around this now to add in those other things like the moves model or the stop model or all the other things that could help out. So we're at the CVTA, we have taken the approach to use whatever the TPO is moving forward with. So I think Amy, you're spot on in looking at it as part of the long range plan process, and then we can consider here in this forum, ways to provide feedback or support for different measures that might be useful for the CVTA.
Thanks, Chet.
If I may, Madam Chair, I'd just add one last thing, and some of you may have already heard this, but the TPO was recently awarded a grant through Federal Highways for the PPPP, the prioritization. We sent out a lot of information about it a while back, but we just got money for that, which is basically looking at how best to it's $1.5 million for us to develop an updated framework for prioritization, focusing on monetizing benefits across a lot of domains. So a lot of that includes the opportunity to do innovative research, which could fold in some of this transit work as well. So I think that
nice.
that's another opportunity that'll start next summer, and it's a 2-year process. So that lines up nicely with what we're shooting for 2027 as well. So I think there's a lot of different opportunities right now that we can kind of fold this into updating and enhancing how our model can perform.
Okay, well, that's all great information and not anything that we really talked about at the subcommittee. Knowing that there's opportunity for refinement for the travel demand model and the evaluation and prioritization process in general that we use in the region. So that's something to keep in mind as well. That, and I'm not saying that we have to do this, but we might not need to be so make such wholesale changes on the transit safety scoring. If we might be able to shore it up in the meantime and make some changes that are manageable, and then wait for the results of this effort that's going to be starting next summer. Anyway, we'll just keep that in the back of our minds as well. Do you have more for us, Miles?
Yes, I do. Thank you. So moving past the travel demand model, so this was sort of how we do things today. The second thing we were looking at is sort of what data do we need to do all the different pieces that we were looking at. So the smart scale piece, what we do today, plus the new GIS-based analysis that would be needed to look at PSAP or some of those other things we're looking at, dedicated lane percentages and pedestrian improvements in the vicinity of projects. So the big thing is really some levels of supporting studies are generally needed, just so we can get enough context and enough detail to be able to score the projects. So that's a feasibility analysis is kind of the minimum end. Obviously, if we have design work done, that's going to give us a lot more information that we can use. And the more information we have, the better and more accurate the modeling can be for project scoring. For the travel demand model, the biggest things we need to know are the extent and the types of service. Everything from there on, we can make assumptions about, but if you have the details, it results in a more accurate score, which is where the feasibility analysis comes into play. So headways, schedule, stop locations, where are the dedicated lanes? That allows us to model everything more accurately. And then on the GIS side, looking at sort of the potential for sidewalk improvements being folded in. The biggest things that we would need to know would be where the station locations or stop locations are, because we have to look at the walkshed around those. What projects are proposed or improvements are proposed with the project? So is there any sidewalk, crosswalk, anything that's included within the scope? And then are there other projects that are proposed outside that are already underway either with local funds or with something that would be in the 6-year program, that we would be able to include in our analysis as well, trying to capture sort of the completeness of the pedestrian infrastructure around each of the stations. For dedicated lanes, it's relatively simple. We just need to know it's from here to here, and the dedicated lanes will be from this midpoint to the end, some level of location so that we can calculate percentages. But otherwise, that's really the bulk of what we would need from the data side. Everything from the PSAP and existing networks we're already collecting, VDOT's already got. We can just pull those to do the calculations.
Okay, so if we were to stick with smart scale and refine the smart scale stuff, the first 2 bullets inform that, right?
Yes. So I think the feasibility analysis is the requirement for smart scale for transit projects. So it'd be lining up with those criteria, essentially.
Right. And then the GIS part of it, that's if we were to use the pedestrian bike safety action plan stuff, then we would need this GIS. If we wanted to fold in the merit, kind of work in that merit scoring for elements of projects that improve safety, that's not going to require new data really, right?
No, most of that would be from the narrative in the applications that would be able to find that, because a lot of it was about like lighting and cameras and other pieces that are would be outside of what we have here.
Right. Okay. Any reactions to the data needs for the proposed safety criteria?
Yeah.
Chet?
Yeah, just one additional point. Looking at the categories that we currently fund with regional money, we've got, studies, PE only. They could be lead-ins to applications for transit projects like this that would get the applicant to that 30% threshold. Which may be, every 2 years, it may line up for some projects to approach them that way, either funded through the regional pot or through other sources, just to kind of set up all those projects to be, shovel ready, or whatever term you want to apply to it.
Yeah, definitely more informed, better data. And that does seem how things are evolving for all of our projects is, you start with a study, you move it through to some 30% design with a PE only funding. And then you can go after the money that you might need to finalize the plans and take it to construction. So we are seeing that, and that's what the state has wanted us to do for many years. And it seems to just be kind of the way to get these projects done. That might be the best approach. Any other reactions to transit safety? I was kind of hoping we'd be able to, I'm just so anxious to get this crossed off the list. I was really hoping we might be able to take some action, but I think probably what we need to do is take it to the subcommittee one more time and get a recommendation from the subcommittee and then to TAC before we take it to the authority. So if the subcommittee people wouldn't mind, I'd like to meet one more time so we can make our decisions about how we're going to tackle this.
That sounds reasonable to me.
Okay. All right. It wasn't on the agenda for action, so that will be how we proceed, and we'll just move on to the next item unless someone has something to say before we move on.
Yeah, just one other thing for the framework. I think it would make sense for the TAC to have a red line copy of the whole thing, before any recommendation is presented, just so we know we're looking at it all together and have captured the last year
Yeah.
of discussion.
Okay, we can do that for sure. Sharon?
Just want, the agenda said action was requested on the,
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, it sure did. Yeah,
I have no problem with your plan, though. That
okay,
sounds good.
yeah,
And if Todd is out, I'm happy to cover on the subcommittee.
okay. Yeah, I don't think we're quite there yet. Okay. All right, moving along to item 8, which is working capital reserve strategy, regional project funding. So if you all recall, we have the interest earnings that the CVTA was asked how they ought to allocate the interest earnings. And it got divvied up to the wayfinding and to the reserve. And then there was another portion that was left to allocate to existing projects or projects, not even existing projects, projects that might need it. So new projects or existing projects. And so we need to have a little bit of discussion on that, and I'll let Chet take over.
Sure, thank you. This is in the agenda packet. There's a staff report, a one-pager, item 8. So Barb did a good job of summarizing. We essentially had the interest earnings discussion at the authority level to allocate $1.5 million to the wayfinding implementation, $5.05 million to initially fund the working capital reserve. And then our discussion point today is the other $5.05 million was set aside to fund regional projects to be determined. And what we want to do today is start a discussion about which projects and approach to identifying the projects could be funded with that $5.05 million. And the bottom of the staff report is essentially what I came up with to start the discussion. First, I think the preferred method, maybe it's not, is to supplement existing regional projects with an outstanding fund balance. So all of the projects that have already gone through the due diligence and discussion at the TAC, at the Finance Committee, at the full authority, and approved for regional funding may be considered for additional funding out of this $5 million pot. And then the second option would be to allocate funding to new regional projects that maybe have applied in the first 3 rounds and did not succeed or were not final candidates. And some of those are listed in the bullet points under item 2. I've also included kind of supporting documentation. So immediately after the staff report is the current list of all the CVT allocations from now through FY31. And I believe that does show fund balance on the right side. Yeah, balance to complete. And then following that is the summary for round 3 of all of the candidate projects and whether they were moved forward or not, the expected award. If it's blank, then there was no, that project did not move forward into the final recommendation to the authority. So that's the starting point. Hopefully everybody's had a few minutes to look over this ahead of time, but none of these are new projects. We're all aware of everything on these lists. So maybe this is something that can start the discussion and move us into that, developing a process for considering what those projects might be. I've also asked, Eric is here, Eric Gregory, legal counsel, in case there are any questions about the working capital reserve or the process that the authority has taken to set this up, and anything in that regard.
Anybody have any comments? Have people had a chance to kind of review this information before the meeting? I think there were concerns when this was brought up initially that we should be looking beyond the list that was presented to the CVTA. Can you remember what was on that list initially, Chet? Was it new projects that didn't get selected, or was it projects with balances? Do you remember that? But we didn't feel like the list was complete enough initially. So I'm assuming this list is expanded upon.
Yes, I mean, there is no limitation for
Mhm.
these candidate projects, so it could be anything. Yeah.
My preference is always to fund existing project needs first. And kind of go from projects that are further along, closer to construction, before funding the new stuff. So I would want to approach it that way, personally, but maybe there's something that the sense of urgency has changed and needs to move along quicker than anticipated. All right, if you guys don't ask for it, I'm going to ask for it.
Well, I think we're just digesting what you're saying, Barb. Yeah, I guess for me, the existing projects that you have listed here, I didn't raise my hand, sorry, Barb.
That's okay.
I just jumped in, sorry.
Fine.
So is this the gap, is this like for the Fall Line Trail Route 1 fill in the gap, is that 24 million, is that the total project cost? Or that's like the gap?
That's the total project cost.
That's the total project. But these weren't final candidates. So I mean, $5 million isn't going to go far for that, right?
Right.
So I mean, I would say that's not, I think it needs to be something that would either fulfill a request that didn't get fully funded, was funded but not fully funded,
Yeah.
and ranked high in the overall scoring.
So if you look at the spreadsheets following, these are existing projects
right.
that have balances to complete.
Yeah, Barb, my recommendation, this is a lot to take in, but that the first table is the adopted allocations plan. So this is every project from round 1 through round 3 and the awarded funding and the balance to complete. I would use that as the first resource because, like you said, it is the existing projects that are already approved. There's a balance to complete on those, a lot of those. So I would use that as the primary resource and then consider other projects later, but there's still going to be the hard decision about how to split up $5 million.
Well, and I think it would be helpful to know which of these projects are being considered in smart scale or for some other funding source. Like I know that the Route 60 Village of Midlothian corridor enhancements, that's a smart scale project. So, it's saying that there's a 14.7 balance to complete, but we're trying to get that funded through smart scale. So I wouldn't think that project would be considered, and there might be more in the list.
So that's not something that we might necessarily have access to. So localities would have to tell us what they've submitted for smart scale, right? Or Sarah. I guess Sarah's raising her hand.
I'm
Sarah,
here.
go ahead.
I'm here. Yeah. The list is online, so we can get it to you, but we're also happy to pull an export report. I think everybody on the call is comfortable with us sharing that with you all, so we can do an export report and get that to you today, Chet.
Yeah. I mean, May I raise my hand? Okay,
Okay,
I had a quick question.
go ahead,
So-
Amy.
Okay, thanks. So is this something, I mean, obviously we don't maybe need to take action on this today. Would this be something that we could maybe wait to see what comes out of Smart Scale? I mean, it's $5 million. I don't know if it's gonna make or break a project right this minute. But it might if it, if we see Smart Scale come out and, where that money might be able to make a difference.
Yeah, I don't think Smart Scale is gonna let us add it after the fact, right?
Right.
But I think if we were to report back to the full authority that we have this as an agenda item, we're doing some more due diligence. We want to wait until Smart Scale comes out to see the results of that.
That's what I'm suggesting, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Just to see, I mean, that's in January, right? We should start to see results in January. Am I right about that, Sarah?
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
I'm being very thoughtful with my hand raising, and Amy and I are doing our best. Yeah, so yes, the results will come out in January. There's still an opportunity within consensus scenario to negotiate any changes. So additional funding, this group has the opportunity to consider their options at that time.
Throw more
when
money at it.
consensus- Yeah, when
Mhm.
consensus is underway. Now, you certainly can't change your leverage and hope your score changes, but the consensus scenario development, the scores are the scores, but it adds additional factors outside of the scoring that for consideration as the CTB members, district rep CTB members make their choices.
Oh, that's interesting. I won't say what, anyway, that's pretty funny. Okay, so you can't change your leveraging amount, but you could slip them 5 million to make it be better in the consensus.
I'm not sure it's slipping anybody 5 million. But this group could make a choice about how they'd want to prioritize things and make that information known to the CTB member.
Nice.
You have a lot of
Okay.
agency there.
All right.
And
Good.
this group, it would obviously go up the chain to the elected officials, the decision-making of CPPA. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great suggestion, Amy. Thanks for the info, Sarah. If everyone's
welcome.
comfortable, we'll keep this on our agenda and just see what comes out of Smart Scale and see if there's a project that gets that doesn't make the cut that we might want to try to move up. All right. Any more discussion on that? We're looking good. We'll move on to item 9, wayfinding implementation, the standard project agreements for those types of projects. Chet.
Great, thanks. So this is a related item. So part of the 3 components of the working capital reserve, 1.5 million got set aside for implementing the following wayfinding plan. And Eric and I started discussing what would be the best mechanism so that localities could be reimbursed for their expenses in terms of wayfinding. And what we are doing is proposing a framework for wayfinding reimbursement. The staff report is in there under item 9. And essentially, each impacted locality would enter into a new standard project agreement that would be locality-wide, that covers all approved segments of the fall line within that jurisdiction, or also under the purview of VDOT in that case. And the format of the SPA would mirror the current approved format that's already being used by localities for other sections. That way, and doing a locality-wide SPA, we would not need to go through amendments to existing project SPAs. Each government or VDOT would be assigned a new CVTA project number that just covers the wayfinding implementation costs. And those costs would be set and have been developed already as part of the adopted wayfinding plan. and would be included as the Appendix A with the allocated project amount. Same process, format, appearance as the other SPAs that have already been approved and proposed to the CVTA. So what we have done at this point, just for discussion, is include a highlighted template, SPA template that mirrors what everybody is using already, where you see locality/VDOT, that will be updated accordingly. We would provide the project ID, just like we do for all the other projects, and essentially use the same format for bringing those proposed SPAs to the Finance Committee, the authority for approval and processing. And then on the staff side, we would have the same process, nothing new, that would go through the approval and signatory requirements for, the Finance Committee chair, the chair of the CVTA, et cetera. Anybody have issues with that? This is, in terms of comfort level and process, this is my preference, so that we can, keep the same types of tools that we already use.
Sharon, go
Yeah.
ahead.
No issues, but just had a question just to confirm. So the language is very similar or the same to what the localities have used for their other CVTA regional projects. We didn't switch a lot. The wording's very similar or the same. Just thinking about routing it through attorneys and everything, that you kept it as much as you could the same.
That's correct. And Eric, if you wanted to weigh in, I think you're muted.
Thanks for the reminder. To answer the question, it's virtually identical to prior SPAs. So the only thing, it's included in your packet if you want to run through it, but there's highlighted provisions in there that we would be the fields you would fill in for the the project ID and the locality or VDOT, and that's basic. That's all that we changed pretty much. So, Chet, am I missing something or not recalling something? I think that's everything else is identical. So,
yeah, that's right. That's right. I think the next step, if nobody has issues, is we would provide a cleaner version for everyone to review, as well as the cost, the dollar amounts that would be included in Appendix A for each locality/VDOT, so that everyone is up to speed on all that before there's any action requested from the TAC.
So Chet, when you're mentioning VDOT, this is wayfinding. Is VDOT willing to install wayfinding as part of their projects? For instance, design build 2. If we wanted to put in wayfinding, would VDOT do that?
Probably not, but I think Mark is ready to answer.
Okay, Mark.
Yeah, I was just going to share that, but we were not anticipating that. That's not a part of the contracts for DB1 or DB2. When we were anticipating that any of the wayfinding efforts that would be done on segments of the trail that were VDOT maintained would be done under permit, just like anything else. Yeah, and we're certainly fine with that.
Yeah, that was my understanding as well.
Yep. Thank you.
So yeah, I can't think of an instance where VDOT would be getting one of these wayfinding agreements.
We would agree.
Okay.
That's great. That's why this is a discussion item.
Okay. Anybody else on wayfinding project agreements?
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
Tyrona here. I was just gonna say that, yeah, I think that it's a good approach that Chet is taking in regard to the SPA and the setup. Yeah, I think it's a good approach. Thanks.
Okay, great. All righty. We'll move on to item number 10 in our agenda, which is the round 4 application process timeframe.
Thanks. This is just a real quick item. We've updated the application cycle for round 4. included that revision in the packet. So again, discussion item, we've got some time before we want to take this out, but this is, I would hope that we can route this to the authority in February, maybe February, March timeframe, just so that we're all set and we're able to get this out to the public before the application window opens in the summer. Right now, we're looking at kind of the first step is getting the forms, the online forms ready in mid-June. And that would be the kickoff, but obviously we want this to be something that the public is aware of, that you know, the localities are able to share out and prep for. So having the schedule published sometime early spring would be ideal. So I think at this point, if anybody take one more look at it, if you see any issues or concerns with any of these timeframes, then let me know. And we'll I'll work with Barb and Sharon to get something on the agenda in a month or two.
Yeah, sounds good. It would be nice if we can have the framework line up with you getting the schedule out to the full authority.
Yeah, that would be great.
Have it all packaged up together. All right. Item 11, CVTA TAC member comments. Are there any comments, updates, news? All righty. Our next meeting is January 12th, 2025 at 1 p.m. The subcommittee transit safety measure subcommittee will meet before that January 12th. So be on the lookout for an email from Chet with some dates, and we'll see subcommittee members there. Otherwise, if I don't see you, I hope you have a great holiday season.
Thanks, Barb. You
And
too.
we're adjourned.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.